morning my life changed forever began like any other in our small stone cottage at the edge of the kingdom. I woke before dawn, as I always did, to the sound of rain pattering against the wooden shutters. The air was cold and damp, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and pine from the forest beyond our village. I was 18 years old that autumn. 18 years of sweeping floors, mending clothes, and trying to remain invisible in my own home. My name is Elara. I had lived in that cottage my entire life, first with my father and mother, and then, after my mother's death when I was 7, with my father and his new wife, Helena. She brought with her a daughter from her first marriage, Celestia. Beautiful, delicate Celestia, with her golden curls and bright blue eyes. Where I was plain and quiet, Celestia was radiant and lively. Where I worked in the kitchen and the garden, Celestia practiced her embroidery and sang songs in the parlor. My father had been a kind man once, I think. But grief had hollowed him out, and Helena had filled the empty spaces with her own desires and ambitions. By the time I turned 12, he barely looked at me anymore. I had become a shadow in my own home, a servant to my stepmother and stepsister. I did not complain. What good would it have done? This was simply the life I had been given, and I had learned to find small moments of peace within it, the way the morning light fell through the kitchen window, the soft warmth of bread dough beneath my hands, the quiet rustle of leaves when I walked through the forest to gather herbs. But that morning, as I descended the narrow stairs to begin my chores, I sensed something different in the air. A tension, thick and suffocating, hung over the house like a storm cloud waiting to break. Helena was already awake, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. Her face was pale, her hands twisting together in a gesture I had never seen from her before. She was always so composed, so controlled, but now she looked almost frantic. "Elara," she said sharply when she saw me. "Come here." I approached slowly, my heart beginning to beat faster. Something was very wrong. "Celestia is ill," Helena said, her voice tight. "Gravely ill. The physician came last night while you were asleep. He says she needs a rare medicine, something that can only be obtained from the capital. It costs more than we have, more than we could ever hope to earn." I felt a flutter of concern despite everything. Celestia had never been particularly kind to me, but I did not wish illness upon her. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Is there anything I can do?" Helena's eyes fixed on me then, and something in her gaze made my blood run cold. It was the look of someone who had made a terrible decision and was determined to see it through. "Yes," she said slowly, "there is something you can do." She told me then in halting words about the offer that had come to our village the week before. The Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories, had been injured in battle 3 years ago. The injury had left him unable to walk, confined to a wheelchair and rumored to be scarred and bitter. He was seeking a bride, but no noble family would send their daughters to such a fate, and so he had offered a substantial sum of money to any family willing to send him a suitable young woman. Helena had answered that call. But she had not offered Celestia, her precious beloved daughter. She had offered me. The room seemed to tilt around me as I understood what she was saying. I was to be sold like livestock, like property, to a man I had never met, a disabled king in a distant castle, and the money would be used to save Celestia's life. "You leave tomorrow," Helena said, and there was no apology in her voice. "Everything has been arranged." I wanted to protest. I wanted to scream, to run, to beg my father to intervene. But when I looked toward the doorway, I saw him standing there, his eyes downcast, his shoulders slumped. He would not help me. He had never helped me, so I simply nodded. What else could I do? That night I packed my few belongings into a small leather bag, a spare dress, a comb that had belonged to my mother, a book of poems I had found years ago in the attic. As I folded each item carefully, I tried not to think about what awaited me. A stranger, a king, a man bound to a chair, bitter and cold. I tried not to think about the fact that I was being sacrificed to save someone who had never shown me kindness. But beneath the fear and the hurt, something else stirred. Something small but persistent. A tiny flame of curiosity. What would it be like, this new life? Could it possibly be worse than the one I was leaving behind? The journey north took 5 days. I traveled in a carriage with 2 silent guards through forests that grew darker and denser, through mountains that pierced the gray sky like jagged teeth. The landscape changed from the gentle rolling hills of my village to something wilder, more ancient. This was the borderland, where the old magic still lingered in the stones and the streams. On the 5th day we arrived at the castle. It rose from the mountainside like something carved from the mountain itself, all dark stone and high towers. It was both beautiful and forbidding, wrapped in mist and shadow. I was taken to a chamber to wait, a room far more luxurious than anything I had ever seen. Tapestries hung on the walls depicting battles and forests and strange creatures. A fire crackled in the hearth. I stood near the window looking out at the valley far below, and wondered if I would ever see my village again. The door opened behind me. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, and there he was, the Alpha King. He sat in his wheelchair, an elaborate thing of carved wood and iron with wolf heads adorning the arms. But it was not the chair I noticed first. It was him. He was younger than I had expected, perhaps only 10 years older than me. His face was indeed scarred, a long mark that ran from his temple to his jaw on the left side. But his eyes were what held me. They were gray like storm clouds, and they were watching me with an intensity that made me feel both seen and exposed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We simply looked at each other, two strangers bound together by circumstance and desperation. "You are Elara," he said finally. His voice was deep, rough around the edges, but not unkind. "Yes, Your Majesty," I replied, surprised that my voice remained steady. "I am Kieran," he said. "Just Kieran when we are alone. I suppose you have been told why you are here." "Yes," I said. "My stepmother sold me to you, to save my stepsister's life." Something flickered in his eyes, surprised perhaps at my bluntness. "And how do you feel about that?" No one had ever asked me that before. No one had ever cared how I felt about anything. I paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like a chapter of my life has ended and a new one is beginning. I do not yet know if it will be better or worse, but at least it will be different." A ghost of a smile touched his scarred face. "An honest answer. That is rare in this place." He wheeled himself closer to the fire, gesturing for me to sit in one of the chairs nearby. I did, my hands folded in my lap, still uncertain but somehow less afraid than I had been moments before. "I will not pretend this is a love match," Kieran said, staring into the flames. "You were bought, and I am not proud of the method by which you came here. But you are here now and we must make the best of it. I will not mistreat you, Elara. That much I can promise." "Thank you," I said quietly. He looked at me again, his gray eyes searching. "Tell me something about yourself. Something true," I thought for a moment. "I like to read," I said. "Poetry mostly. And I enjoy walking in the forest early in the morning when everything is still and quiet." "There are extensive forests here," he said, "and a library. You are free to use both." Something loosened in my chest. Freedom. Such a small word, but I had not felt it in so long. The weeks that followed were strange and unexpected. I had imagined a cold, bitter man who would ignore me or treat me cruelly. But Kieran was neither of these things. He was reserved, yes, and carried a heavy sadness with him always. But he was also intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly kind. We fell into a routine. Mornings I would explore the castle and its grounds, walking through the misty forests just as I had loved to do at home. Afternoons I would spend in the library, losing myself in books. Evenings, Kieran and I would dine together, and slowly, carefully, we began to talk. About books and history and the world beyond the castle walls. About loss and loneliness and the weight of crowns and expectations. I learned that he had been a warrior once, fierce and unstoppable. The injury that bound him to his chair had come from an ambush, a blade that had severed the nerves in his spine. He spoke of it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. But I could hear the grief beneath his words. The grief of a man who had lost part of himself, and slowly something unexpected began to grow between us. Not the passionate love of fairy tales, but something quieter and deeper. Companionship, understanding, trust. One evening, 3 months after my arrival, as we sat by the fire in his study, Kieran reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm and gentle. "I did not think I would ever feel this again," he said quietly. "This and a peace. You have brought light into this dark place, Elara, into my dark life." I looked at our joined hands, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. I had been sold, yes, bought like property to save someone else's life. But somehow in this strange castle with this scarred king, I had found something I had never had before. I had found home. You have given me something too, I said, meeting his eyes. You have given me a place where I matter, where I am seen. He raised my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You matter more than you know. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, soft and silent. And inside, by the warm fire, I realized that sometimes the worst beginnings can lead to the most unexpected endings. I had been sold to save my stepsister, but in losing everything, I had gained everything that mattered. I had gained myself, and in time I had gained love.